Thank you, everybody. So my name is Rotimi Rainwater, and I really appreciate everybody being here and the Sands Corp for being able to allow us to screen the film. I'll step back. Lost in America is a deeply personal story for me. Is that better? All right. So it's a deeply personal story that I decided I wanted to make a doc about youth homelessness after I had made a feature film about it. And we screened it for Congress, and not one member of Congress showed up, unfortunately. And I got the opportunity to meet Darla and Nan Roman and just everybody on the national stage. And it became apparent that it was a moral obligation for me to make this film. And maybe not one I would have taken so quickly if I knew I was going to be spending 4 years making this film. But the topic and the kids deserve that. So as you'll see, this was, as we like to say, it's the first true national look at youth homelessness. There have been some great movies out there that have stayed in certain cities, you know, and we wanted to show people that youth homelessness isn't just an urban problem. You know, it's in Brattleboro, Vermont. It's in Connecticut, Orlando, Florida. It's everywhere. And so I appreciate everybody coming up and watching this. And I think later on we'll be doing a Q&A session. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, this is Lost in America.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope you found focus groups productive, and we really appreciate all your input and participation. Please make sure to check the movement website in the near future, because we will be uploading a synthesis of the focus groups once Dr. Gardner is done with the analysis of it. So stay tuned for that. And he'll be back in a half hour to actually do an initial recap of all the focus group session and all the great discussions that were had in there. But right now, we're delighted that Rotimi Rainwater, director of Lost in America, is able to tell us more about his personal journey with this film. We invite the audience to ask Rotimi whatever you'd like to know about the film, but I'm going to go ahead and start us with one question as our volunteers make their way to the room with microphones for you all. So Rotimi, thanks a lot for having us here, man.
Oh, thank you.
The film's just incredible. I mean, it's just visual advocacy at its finest, right? So we heard about your story, your passion, but how did all this get started for you? Tell us kind of the backstory, how all this came together, leading to the actual production of Lost in America.
So I was casting another film, and I was working with this actress, Shanae Grimes, who was the lead in 90210, like the reboot. And we were having dinner, and across the street was a like a half-built apartment building that had been empty for years. And just off the cuff, I was like, you know, I would have slept, you know, there. You know, I would have definitely found a place to sleep there. And she kind of started asking me questions, and I don't know, for some reason, because she was just kind of punk, she just kind of had this energy that understood it, I confided in her that I'd been homeless. It was the first time I'd really talked to anyone outside of like my close personal friends. And she just really pushed, like, we've got to tell that story. So I wrote the script to Sugar, and we started filming it, and went around and screened it for everyone. And seeing that nobody from Congress had came, and seeing how big the issue is, because as a homeless youth, and this was in 90 or 91, there weren't a lot of shelters around, and I didn't really have that mentality. It was like, wake up, go be with my mom, you know? And so it was just, when I just saw the vastness of the issue, I just really kind of felt like, you know, I know people in all these organizations, and frankly, if I don't tell the story, if I don't make this film, like, I'm an ass. Like, I have that ability, and it became a karmic duty. So that's how it started. And we were a really small film when we started. I borrowed $750, went to Venice, shot for a day. I cut together a trailer, and we were able to do an Indiegogo campaign where we raised, I think it was like $14,000. And then we went and shot for a couple weeks and came back, and we just did it like that for the first year and a half until people saw that what we were doing was real, you know, and we started getting investors. But it was I was talking to an organization here, and they were like, yeah, we're starting off small. And it's like, that's how we did it, you know?
Yep.
So that's how it started, yeah.
Awesome. So totally grassroots, just
Oh, yeah.
awesome. That's the way to do it. Do we have anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. Oh,
I think we got our mic folks over there. We got one hand over here and then one back there. You are next, ma'am. I promise.
and did they turn the air conditioning down? Okay.
So I know that you surveyed a lot of homeless youth, and we heard a lot of personal stories. But how many would you say that you came across in the 4 years that maybe they didn't want to open up and be on the film?
None, honestly. I would say there's probably 60 or 75 that I couldn't tell their stories, but I think the authenticity of not coming from, what's the way to say it? So like when I would meet a youth, I would cop a squat next to them. You know, I wouldn't stand up and talk down to them. So there was no separation. And then the first thing I did, which was really difficult for me, was I would share my story, you know? So I think what's really important to remember is like these youth are, I mean, they've just been trampled upon, you know? I mean, when you're born, you know, you see your mother and father, and they're supposed to be there, you know? And if it's not them, like somebody hurt them or somebody let them down. So there's this damaged mentality that they have. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. But for me, it was like, before I'm asking you to be vulnerable to me, I'm going to be vulnerable to you, you know? And so everybody that I talked to wanted to be involved. I can't remember a youth who was just like, no. I think we had a couple who in the, like, once they were in the film, 6 months later, a year later, would like call me freaking out, you know? Like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I want to say that. And I would send them their story, you know? And I'd be like, okay, well, listen, if you're not comfortable, let me know. But here it is. And nobody backed out. So, yeah.
So would you say that youth really want to advocate for themselves if given the opportunity?
You know, I think there's this defensive mechanism, this wall that comes up. Like I've met so many youth, especially on sugar. I met a couple youth who were like, man, I love it here. Where would I ever want to go live somewhere? And because I was new in having these conversations with people, like I bought it. I was like, okay, well, maybe I guess that does exist. And then I remember this one guy named Jeremiah, and he sings at the end of the film, and, you know, we've kept in touch since, so God, 7 years. And we were sitting there talking. They had a bag of wine. You know, they were slapping the bag and drinking it. You know, we're on the Venice Beach. And then he's like, did I ever tell you that my stepdad shot me?
Wow.
I was like, what? And so I've realized that everybody who does have this defense mechanism, that's exactly what it is. Like, no child truly wants to be on the street. And so if you think about that, then I think every child wants somebody, no matter how hard they fight against it, because it's the defense mechanism, you can't be vulnerable. Deep down inside, they want somebody who's going to make that difference for them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they necessarily think it needs to be a parent. You know, I think that the greatest gift that a homeless youth can get is to find that one connection with an adult, you know, somebody who's going to be their mentor and help them.
Exactly. Ma'am?
Hi, thank you. I had two quick questions. One is, do you have any more updates of some of the people that were in the film? And the other question is, did you not go to where there was snow or other issues?
So those are the most up-to-date updates. And yes, I went quite a few places where there was snow, but the most difficult thing for me with this film, after interviewing 30 youth, was figuring out like who to cut. And it was, I mean, even thinking like who I had to cut was just a horrible experience. And I remember we did a piece on, in Denver, they were giving out tea lights, because you could put the tea lights in your sleeping bag. to keep you warm, you know? And they have these things too where like they're the gloves and you pop them and they're like finger warmers and stuff. But it just happened like these certain stories just didn't make it. We had a great success story because we wanted to tell people, and we had this section where like, what would happen if parents didn't abandon or reject their children for being LGBT with like, you know, fire fall from the sky, cats and dogs. And so there was a young man named Grayson who was born a female, transitions to male, and is Mormon, parents deeply Mormon, sings in the Mormon choir, wants to be in the tabernacle choir. And his bishop is the bishop that we talked to who accepted him. And it was in the middle of winter and all that stuff. But it just, as the film needed to get, like people's attention span is very limited, you know? So I started with like a 2-hour film, and now we're at like an 83-minute film. And I wish it could be 2 hours, but everything that wasn't exactly relatable had to be cut, unfortunately. But our goal when we do our DVD release is to have, you know, probably like 12, 15 more stories in there that you can see everyone else, and at least honor the fact that they share their stories with us.
Okay, we have one back there.
Hold it, you have it. Okay. So I had 2 quick questions. The first one's the easy one. When can we see this video or show it to other people? And the second question goes along the lines of sex trafficking and how those kids end up stuck out there. And my question is on did you notice any legal implications in this case? So here's an example. In some cases, the kids that go out to be sex trafficked, they come from homes where there was abuse of some kind, physical, sexual, and the like. And it might have gone on, and CPS might have come and gone to the point whereas the child knows not to open up the CPS. Mm-hmm. When the child runs away, they're obligated to go back to the original house. They can't go to grandma's house. They can't go to the aunts. They can't go to the step-parents. They can't go to cousin. If the abusing parent says, no, that kid's a brat, they need to come back home, they have to go back home. Did you see system problems along those lines when you were doing your investigation? And how tempted were you to kind of report on how the legal system might be a little bit culpable in why these kids are in the jam they're in?
That's an incredible question.
That's a great question.
To the point where, honestly, if you don't mind, I don't remember your first one.
The release date.
When's it,
The
when-
release
the
date.
release.
When's it coming
yeah.
out to release?
When can we all see it?
Sorry. Well, so right now we're going through the process of going through film festivals. And so I believe that the film will be out end of summer next year. We have to get a distributor first. But we've already had so much attention from certain distributors. One distributor we're not going to go with because, well, they're not going to be around anymore because their boss wasn't, yeah. So, but, yeah, we got cameras here, so I'm not going to go into that story.
Yep.
But as far as, I will say this, there's good and bad in every part of society. But the way it is now, it is my heartfelt feeling, which is weird, that the foster care system is broken. Foster care, you know, the foster care system is a financial system, unfortunately, now. When they changed, I was speaking with a woman who was deeply involved in the foster care system, and she's like, 20 years ago, the first pitch was, you're doing good. And like when you would find a foster parent, that was the first part. And now the first part is you can get paid, you know? And there's this thing in the foster care system, and again, I'm not a part of the foster care system, so if you think I'm wrong, we can talk about it later or whatever, and just know that, you know, I don't know half as much as you do. But in the foster care system, they're afraid, like there's so few foster parents, if you will, and they don't want to rock the boat, you know? So there's not the kind of oversight that there should be. When I dealt with Kiki, when I dealt with, even when I dealt with Lexi, like Lexi as a success story is still fighting foster care. You know, when she was she's from Connecticut and going down to DC, I was sitting there in her house while she's in tears on the phone with the foster care system because they're supposed to be driving her or getting her transportation or helping her with her apartment, and they wouldn't. There was one time that she's got some health problems, and she needed to get rushed to the hospital, and her person from DCF was supposed to be there and didn't even show up. you know? And so there's just a lot that's going on. And I think, I don't want to paint the foster care system as purely negative, but I think there needs to be an overhaul of it. I think there needs to be a national oversight. It's the biggest national social issue that doesn't have one set of rules, It goes from state to state to state to state. And I think there should be one age that you age out. And I think in my opinion, the biggest issue amongst all of this is it's very segregated, very compartmentalized. So you've got DCF or foster care money, and you've got McKinney-Vento money. And to give a perfect example, Lexi, in her sophomore year, was in 8 different foster care homes, which meant she went to 8 different high schools. And she was like, I'm not going to graduate. And as you can tell, she's a very driven young lady, very into her education. And so she was like, what do I have to do that I can stay at this one high school? And she had to drop out of the foster care, the housing part of it, and be homeless, claim homeless, so she could go live in a homeless shelter or a homeless youth shelter. And that way she could get money from the McKinney-Vento and graduate from the same high school. And I think there needs to be a common sense approach to this. Karen Bass said it best, Congresswoman Karen Bass said it best. When we, as the government, take over a youth, we are signing a contract, we're gonna be your parent. Now, I'm a parent, and I can tell you, when my kids turn 18, I'm not turning my phone off. When I'm turning 18, I'm not telling them, I'm gonna tell them, get out, go do something, but if they need to come home, they can. And right now, they're trying to make programs, but these kids are just at 18 years old here, or whatever the age is, here's a black plastic trash bag, you got 30 minutes. I think there needs to be a common sense approach. 6 months before they're gonna age out, there should be somebody who can go between all of the agencies and say, okay, in 6 months, this is what's gonna happen. What's our plan? And if nothing can come up for some strange reason, there's funding for you to stay in that house. No matter what, you won't end up on the street. And I think until that kind of approach is taken for these kids, I think there's not gonna be a strong solution to keep them off the streets. And as far as calling the police, I mean, we talked about it. We even talked about it with Connor Michaela. We contacted our senator, our state senator, and we're like, let's go after this doctor. And at the end of the day, the youth has to be prepared to face that. And I had to accept that. If it took me 20 years to face the fact that I had been on the streets and really deal with it in a very public manner, that maybe these youth, it's going to take them a while to be able to deal with that fact and then maybe contact the police or whatever it might be. Sorry if that was long-winded.
Great question and great answer. Rico.
Hi. This doesn't have anything to do with the film, and it's probably a stupid question, but I was thinking about it. Are homeless people denied the right to vote?
I don't think they would be if they have an ID. You have to have an ID, but I don't know.
There's no mandate saying they can't vote, but there are definitely barriers because of their
Yes.
homelessness that make it difficult to exercise that civic right.
Yeah. And another thing for the gentleman asked me about the sex trafficking question. Karen Countryman, are you here? Are you still? The woman who raised her hand right there, she's an expert, and if you had any questions for her, she could really answer a lot of those questions. She's been doing it for 20 years, so yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Nope, you cut me off.
No,
No, I'm joking.
It's that coffee. No, she's a leading nation expert on this issue, so if you have any questions about that, please direct them over there.
Raise your hand one more time so everybody can see you.
Go ahead.
She's right there. She doesn't want to raise her hand.
She's the one that's blushing in all black. So I got a question for you. So obviously, you're trying to cast a spotlight on the issue of youth homelessness. And what I'm wondering is, we also ended up addressing, or at least exploring, sex trafficking, the foster care system, the LGBTQ youth. And was that intentional on your part, or was that something that sort of rose to the surface and kind of themes that you saw as you explored your journey?
That was very intentional. So I made the mistake of not doing a lot of research when I did Sugar. So I went, I don't know if Darla's here, but she was at the screening. I went and I did a screening for all the national organizations in DC. So everybody you saw up in the film. And in Sugar, because when I was on the street, I just didn't have any gay friends at the time, there was not an LGBT homeless youth there. And man, they let me have it. Like, why isn't this here? And I was like, I never really did research. Didn't know that almost half of homeless youth identify as that. So when I went to make this documentary, I was like, I'm 100% going to deal with all the issues I can. And so I asked Darla and Nan Roman and Lori Jackson, like, really what are the issues I should focus on? And it was these issues and mental health. And the only issue, so we had it was much more difficult to find youth who are going through mental health issues and have them involved in the film. And we did find one, and it just went completely sideways. Like, the police were after him. It was a really scary situation to be in. So we decided, like, since it wasn't going to be beneficial for the film, and we didn't want to tell his story, that was the only one that we didn't really deal with. But no, it was very intentional. Like, I didn't want this to be a film just about homeless youth. I wanted people to walk away knowing all the issues that they deal with, or most of them.
That's awesome. I thought you did it for the synergies of the summit, but...
Yeah, exactly.
Do we have another question? Allison.
Sure. Hi, thank you first of all for making the film. It was just amazing. I don't know, I have a 16 and 18-year-old myself, and I can't even imagine what these kids have been through. So my first question was more of globally, like, what are next steps for the film, and how do you raise awareness nationally? And I think you answered that.